here the day you get back.
Just so you want something exciting to start your Monday with.
Yeah.
All right, are we about ready? Are we still waiting for more people, Hayden?
We're just gonna go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Juliana is getting us broadcasting online. I think we're good to go. So hey y'all, it's 2:34 on Monday, April 27th. We're gonna get started with our first Safe Streets for All Action Plan Advisory Committee meeting. Thank you all for joining us. For those of you who don't, I think I know most of y'all, but my name is Hayden Dettinger. I'm a transportation planner here in the Public Works Department. I'm serving as the city lead on this project. Lacey's going to get into a little bit more context around this here in just a sec, but a couple of years ago, the city was awarded a $2.8 million grant to do some planning and demonstration surrounding safe streets and roads for all. As part of that project, we're composing and then enacting our Safe Streets for All Action Plan, the city's transportation safety action plan. And I think we're supposed to start with a public comment period. So any public comment from anyone who's not in this room, I think we're good on that piece. So we'll go ahead and move forward. And let's just start with some introductions. I'm Hayden, as I mentioned, and we'll pass it over to Kara here. We'll work around the room and then we'll get to the folks online.
Hi, everyone. Kara Hall, City Traffic Engineer.
Carl Lund, Marion County Traffic Engineer.
Paul Tigan, Ward 1 City Councilor.
Chris French, Service Planning Manager at Chariots.
Juliana Douglas, Climate Action Plan Manager.
Lily Manville, Executive Director at Upstream Public Health.
Virginia Stapleton, I'm with Salem Bike Vision.
Julie Hansen, Transportation Planning Manager here at the city.
Anthony Gamalo, Transportation Planner at DKS Associates.
Then we'll pass it off to you, Lacey.
Yeah, Lacey Brown, project manager on the consultant side with DKS Associates.
Kim, if you want to go next.
Hi, Kim Sapinar, Transportation Planner from SCADS, Salem Area Transportation Study.
Brandon.
Hi, everyone. Brandon Williams from ODOT Region 2. I'm the regional planner.
Sergeant Kofoid.
Scott Kofoid, Salem Police.
And Harshala.
Harshala Sardar, Transportation Engineer from DKS Associates.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Lacey to get started with the project overview.
Great, thank you. And apologies to everyone that I'm not there in person. I came down with a cold, and so I'm doing this from home to save you all from the joys that I'm experiencing at the moment. But I've got lots of cold and hot drinks to hopefully get me through this without coughing too much. Okay, so our agenda for today, I think you have a hard copy there with you as well, but we just covered our introductions. I'll go through an overview of the project. And then really the bulk of our time together today is going to be kind of talking through and brainstorming what the vision, mission, and goals should be for this project. And then we'll wrap it up with kind of the next steps moving forward. Okay, so why are we all here today? So in the last 5 years of data that we have between 2020 and 2024, there were 85 people that were killed and 527 people that were severely injured in traffic crashes in the city of Salem. And these were our family, our friends, our coworkers, and our neighbors. And this is something that we all care about and want to see change through the safety action plan. So if you're not familiar with it, there's a topic called Vision Zero. Vision Zero is an international movement aimed at eliminating traffic fatalities and serious injuries. And this is really going to help frame up what this safety action plan incorporates, kind of the philosophies that we're looking at, and will be kind of a guiding philosophy for the whole development of this plan, including the projects and strategies that we're coming up with. So when we think of that vision of zero, right, 0 deaths and traffic fatalities and serious injuries in the future. If 0 is our goal, the safe system approach really lays out how we get there. This is the framework developed by the U.S. Department of Transportation that builds reinforced layers of redundancy of protection to help prevent crashes from happening in the first place, but also to minimize the harm that's caused when those crashes do occur. And so this safe system wheel here on the slide, around the edge, around the circle, are what we call safe system principles. These include that death and serious injury are unacceptable. It recognizes that humans make mistakes, that humans are vulnerable, that responsibility is shared between all of us for a safe system, that safety should be proactive, and that redundancy is a crucial part of this system. And then the wedges of the wheel here, we call the safe system elements, kind of represent all the different perspectives on safety that we need to address to really reach that Vision Zero. So the first is safe vehicles. We also have safe speeds, safe roads, post-crash care, and safe road users. And so when we think of a holistic safety action plan that's really going to help the city of Salem move towards this vision of zero, we need to consider all of these different elements, how they work together, and how we can each do our own parts to bring those, to move those forward within the city. So as Hayden mentioned, this Safe Streets for All action plan was funded through a federal grant. And it does outline, we'll go, I think the next slide will go through what those requirements are tied specifically to that grant. But at a very high level, this plan will include data-driven goals, strategies, and projects that are aimed at guiding the investments for the city and helping us to focus the limited resources where they matter the most, empowering the city of Salem to pursue grant funding and external sources to implement safety projects. And at the end of the day, the goal is to save lives. Okay. So the role of the advisory committee. So again, thank you all for being here today and being willing to play a part in this project. Really, your role is to share your perspectives and insights throughout the project. Help us understanding the data. We know that the data is limited and we use it to the best of our ability, but there's always nuances and there's more stories than just the numbers and the data. We also want you all to share what's important to you and to be a voice for your agency and your community. So there'll be 4 total advisory committee meetings throughout the course of the project, including today. And then another ask we will have from you here shortly is to help promote and participate in some of the community engagement efforts. And really, your involvement is going to help us develop a plan that is really useful and meaningful to the city. In terms of timeline, so this safety action plan is going to take approximately 1 year. So we're at kind of the project kickoff stage. Of course, today we're talking through the vision, mission, and goals and having our task force meeting, or sorry, advisory committee meeting. Now through the summer, we'll be working on engaging with the community to hear their thoughts and concerns and priorities regarding traffic safety. We'll be doing a lot of data analysis to understand where within the city kind of the highest risk for these fatal and serious injury crashes exist, and identifying what the safety needs are. And then in through the fall, we'll be working on developing some draft safety solutions, some strategies and policies that we'll be sharing with you all at the next task force meeting. Whoops, sorry, I skipped one. So we'll meet with you after kind of we've identified those safety needs, get your guys' feedback on those and make sure they resonate. Then we'll move into the solutions. Once we have those draft solutions and are starting to document the plan itself, we'll meet with you all again to get your input on that. And then we'll meet with you one more time as we get into spring of 2027 and we're finalizing the safety action plan. Okay, before we get into kind of the vision, mission, and goals, any questions on what I presented so far? Or anything anyone wants to add?
I have a question. So a while ago, I worked with Scats and a bunch of the same players. Chariots was there, everybody was in the room, and we worked on a safety plan. So what is the difference between what we're working on now and what we did then?
Yeah, so I'll take a first cut, and then Hayden and Julie and team, you're welcome to fill in. So they're very similar. So the SCAT safety plan was looking at the whole region that was encompassed in the Salem-Keizer area boundary. This will be just the city of Salem. And so it'll provide a little bit more granularity and focus on the city streets. So when, for example, and part of the SCAT's safety plan, we ranked all of the locations across the whole region. So there were some locations in Keizer, some locations in the county, some locations in the city. And when we go through that same process and identify the priorities and the emphasis areas, they'll be specific to the city of Salem.
Part of the scope of work for this project also does intentionally bring in the work that has already been done for the MTSAP to this Transportation Safety Action Plan as well, in the interest of not duplicating work that's already been completed. The one other piece I would also add is there are some funding considerations that come into play with the jurisdiction having their own Transportation Safety Action Plan. For some of those funding opportunities we've been using, like, well, there's this MTSAP that includes the city of Salem, but this development of our own, as Lacey mentioned, more granular to city of Salem interests, and then also helpful for us as we pursue more safety related funding to have a city Transportation Safety Action Plan.
And I would just add that we also want to be very intentional to include strategies that pull in all aspects of the city. So it's not just, public works, traffic engineering. We also want to be intentional in, working with fire and working with police in terms of strategies that they bring to the table. And I will note that Brian Carrera from the fire department did join a little bit late, so he is online.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up to that. So, does this safety plan include the interstate and other state-controlled highways and things like that, or is it just city streets?
It's a good question. The focus is definitely going to be on city jurisdiction, but that being said, like the example that comes to mind is Mission Street is an ODOT facility.
Right.
But we have, city of Salem residents who've used that facility as pedestrians. So while this is focused on, roads and streets that are a part of the city of Salem's jurisdiction, there is kind of a broader encompassing perspective on it as, Salem residents who use other facilities as part of their transportation through Salem.
Yeah, so I think it will include those ODOT. We do have Brandon Williams also here from representing ODOT. I would say that when we come down to specific projects, we might include some state ones, but the ones that we'd be focusing are ones on city facilities and what we can do to make those happen.
Great.
Awesome. Great questions. And feel free to interrupt me anytime if you think of another question.
I do want to add one other thing is that through the Metropolitan Transportation Safety Action Plan, the SCATs, the Council of Governments did a lot of public outreach. And so we are purposely making sure that we look at that. We don't want to go out and ask people the same questions. We're probably going to be looking at, these are themes we heard, and then take it back to say, do these, still, reflect what, you, the public is seeing.
Yeah, thanks for saying what I wanted to say. The reason why I asked the question is I hear a lot in our community and just a general frustration of government's inability to respond quickly to the needs of a community. And so when I hear that we're going to be kind of redoing or kind of re-looking at some of the work that we've already done, that question kind of comes up to me. Are we, moving as fast as our community is asking us to move on something that is as serious as, the loss of life in our community? So that's why I bring it up. And I want to make sure that we're, taking all that information and doing the right amount of outreach, but also we know there's a lot of science and data behind what makes streets safe, and making sure that we can, I guess, go there confidently, and knowing what we need to do in order to make, everybody be able to get home safely. We can do that without a community survey, I think. If that makes sense, right? Like we have the data, I understand the education part, but I want to make sure that we're moving as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think that that's, that is important. We're not doing things because we're working on this plan. We are still actively pursuing projects. We are doing the 20th Plenty demonstration project through the same grant. We're taking other actions while we're doing this, but one of the difficulties that I'm sure you recognize and Councillor Tybin recognizes is that we have so many needs in our city to reach this goal that sometimes it can be hard to justify why are we doing this and not this. So the idea of this plan is to really help us focus on which are the things that are going to have the biggest impact, even if it's maybe not the thing that people complain about the most. I don't know how,
Yep.
What is a data-driven solution versus a popularity, contest, so.
Yeah, that was great. And to hit on that point again, Julie, you just reminded me the part of the grant for the 20 is Plenty requires that the city have this safety action plan too, right? So there was that, as part of getting the funding for that demonstration grant, was the requirement to develop the city's own plan.
And one of the areas in particular was that we were shown to be short on or fall short on was the transparency and data, sort of reporting. And so that's something that we're going to be really beefing up as a result of this plan, is having a place where people can come and see how are we doing, in terms of actual safety on our roads.
Is that impacted by ODOT's reporting schedule on like crash data? Cause I know that's like 5 years, right?
Yes, so our ability to get crash data, and Lacey can talk about this more, probably is tied to, what we hear from, what we get from ODOT, which is the DMV reported accidents. We, do also have police in the room, and they can sometimes get things a little quicker, particularly when it comes to, the number of fatalities, so they might have something for last year. Well, I know they do. I know they have the number of fatalities in the city last year, which we don't get from ODOT for yet, another
Right.
year and a half. So we will be pulling in what we have there, what we can access.
Great.
I'll shut up now.
Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you. All right, let's dive into the fun stuff here. So first, why vision, mission, and goals matter. So really what we're trying to achieve here is setting the direction for Salem safety efforts, as we've mentioned a few times already, wanting to reflect the community values and priorities, and really establish a shared understanding of what success means. So when we get to the end of this project, how do we know that it was successful? And so then at the bottom here, I have one more kind of bullet, which is to meet the federal requirements for this specific plan. And we'll touch on that here in a second. But when we talk about vision, mission, and goals, vision is really looking at what do we aspire to achieve. The mission should explain what do we do to achieve that. And then the goals is how do we do it. So when we kind of keep those three kind of very simple definitions in mind as we walk through thinking about what we might want the vision, mission, and goals to be for this specific project. So this checklist here on the left, we won't go into all of them, but these are the required elements of a safety action plan to meet the federal requirements for this grant. The first one is this leadership commitment to a zero goal. And so the term zero, again, is that zero fatalities and serious injuries. So we need to have a target date for achieving that zero goal, or we need to have a target date for achieving a percentage reduction with an eventual goal of getting to zero. So there's kind of two ways. It's either we want to reach zero by this date, or we want to achieve this percentage reduction by this date and eventually get to zero. So there's two different kind of ways to approach this and still meet the requirements from USDOT. I will say already you might be seeing the intermixing of terms, right? Vision, mission, and goals. I'm going to show you a few example statements of what I would call vision statements, but a lot of safety action plans refer to them as goal statements. So there's a lot of kind of terminology that gets intertwined as to whether it's a goal statement or a mission statement or a vision statement. So I'll just kind of say that out front. It's going to get a little confusing because each jurisdiction uses their own way of describing these statements. But for USDOT, somewhere in the plan, we will have to have a statement that addresses this requirement. So to that end, we've got a couple examples here from local and regional other safety action plans. So the SCATS Metropolitan Safety Action Plan, which we were just talking about, they have this statement. It says, we envision a region with 0 crash-related deaths and life-changing injuries by 2035, and a 50% reduction in these crashes by 2030. Very similarly is the Marion County Transportation Safety Action Plan, which also has that percentage and ultimate goals, but it says Marion County envisions a future where no one is killed or seriously injured while traveling on our roadways. We aim to reduce the number of fatal and serious injury crashes on county roadways by 20% by 2030 and by 50% by 2035. So this is an example where there's the eventual goal of 0, but the goals tied to the date are a percentage reduction. And then lastly, what I have here is this is a draft statement. The statewide Oregon Safety Action Plan is currently being updated and will be finalized later this year. And the current draft statement says that the TSAP advances Oregon's long-term safety vision and establishes an ambitious yet achievable interim goal, 0 fatalities and serious injuries by 2050, and reduce fatalities and serious injuries by 30% by 2035. So we don't have to necessarily align with any of these, match any of these. It's just some different examples of how you can put together what I would call these are more vision statements, but they do have a little bit of that goal aspect into them by putting the date by which we want to achieve some of these metrics. Any initial kind of thoughts or reactions to some of the example statements here?
Yes. So for me, I'm just looking at these numbers and thinking like, these are all really a lot of, question. Is this a lot of just really well-intentioned people saying this is a dream that we have? Or is there a way for us to say, if we did X, Y, and Z, we could actually have the data to know how much we could reduce crashes or deaths? Does that make sense? Or is it better?
So I'll take a stab at that from the
Yeah.
county perspective.
Okay.
So one of the things that we see in the county is I think it was 46% of our road fatalities were because of alcohol related crashes, which is part of where the 50% comes from. So if we eliminated alcohol related fatal crashes, we would eliminate 50%.
Yeah.
And so one of our theories is that we want to really aim at impaired intoxicated driving. So that's where that 50% comes from. And so I don't know where the SCATS one comes from, but that's where the county would be.
Are
Yeah,
there other, sorry, is there other, like, for the city of Salem, you know, we know kind of our data, I don't have it all in my brain, but we know kind of what the issues are. So does staff have any ideas about how they would like to approach this as far as like, you know, the data, and is it achievable for us to create change structurally in our system in order to actually meet some of these goals?
Yes, I would point to Lacey maybe, because Lacey, you're actually the most familiar with the data since you worked on the Metropolitan Transportation Safety Action Plan. I know that we're early in the scope for this project, so we haven't necessarily done all of the data analysis, but do you have any initial thoughts, Lacey?
Yeah, so I'd say there's definitely key trends that we can focus on. I think to the question about how much we can reduce any one of these types of crashes, right? So I think Carl's point is a great one, right? In terms of if we can eliminate all impaired driving crashes, that would make a significant reduction. We have varying degrees of understanding of how much different strategies will actually reduce crashes. So that's something there's still some uncertainty there in terms of some of the engineering stuff we have a lot of research on, and we can say, yes, if you put out this enhanced crossing treatment, it is expected to reduce crashes by X amount. And we have very concrete information on that. A lot of the others in terms of building a traffic safety culture where people want to keep themselves and the people around them safe, and they make choices to do that. Related to enforcement and education and outreach, those we know that they make a difference, but there's not a lot of data into how much. So I would say that's where we come to this like safe system of layering different pieces of information and different strategies on top of each other. I don't know that we would get to a point where we could say, if you go do these 16 projects, you will see this exact reduction, unless we're only looking at engineering, and we don't want to do that necessarily. So,
And if we're only looking at engineering, you know, the thing about those crash reduction factors is they're great for a specific area where that project is, but we have a whole city, right? So, you know, we're probably not going to be able to take one measure and apply it absolutely everywhere to come up with a uniform crash reduction. So I think the answer is we're not going to probably have a very data informed reduction amount. I do like Carl's example. You know, it's sort of, you know, see, it sounds to me like you guys are planning not to eliminate any other crash causes, just the alcohol ones.
Blame it all other ones, but.
I know. I'm just, you know, joking a little bit, but yeah.
I appreciate Virginia's perspective, though I also think at the start of a vision, you hang a picture of the moon on the wall, knowing that's what you're trying to go to, and you don't know exactly how you're gonna get there. So for a vision statement, what they're asking for is, say 0, say a year you think it's gonna happen by. If it's gonna be a lot of re-engineered intersections, then yeah, probably 2050 makes sense, because we know how long it takes to re-engineer intersections across the city. I've been waiting for the one, you know, at the end of my block since I got here 10 years ago, and I bet it's gonna be another 20 years. So I don't know, I feel like, you know, having a vision for 2040, or I think 2050 was in the draft, makes sense if what you're talking about is like re-engineering a lot of concrete to get there. Though it feels less urgent, to your point. Well, like, 2050, great. It's a long ways
Yeah,
away.
I
But I
think-
think the culture part that
Yeah.
Julie's talking about is an element too that can't be quite measured the same way.
If I'm remembering our meeting at SCATS where we set that vision, it was very moon on the wall. You know, like let's really feel the sense of urgency that our community is saying that they are feeling, and have that be reflected. But at the same time, knowing how money is and knowing how construction is and planning, it's all gonna take a lot of time.
The other thing is that we are, updating our transportation system plan to, with an out year of 2050. And so in a way, it makes sense to align something with that, so that as we're developing it, we can be very focused on the projects we select, you know, helping us move towards that goal. Maybe not achieve it, but helping us get, you know.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. Could we do more than one interim goal? Could we do a little bit gradual. I don't know if that would help anybody, but might help some in our community who are feeling that sense of urgency or want to be seen as, you know, I don't know if that makes any sense. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's not a limit on the number of interim goals per se. I will also mention, I don't think I said this, but you see a lot of 2035 in these statements, and that's because the current version of the statewide TSAP had a 0 goal by 2035. And that, as I mentioned, is getting updated this year. And so I think that's where a lot of those 2035 numbers came from, was trying to align with that, just for that context. But I will also say that a later task that we have, once we have more of the data and once we've looked at some of the strategies, is coming up with performance measures that we can tag goals onto those performance measures as well. So we can have, let's say, reduce crashes by this much in years 5, 10, 15 years out. And that can be part of our performance measure that helps us achieve this ultimate vision. So some of that might come out in those kind of performance measures where that would be something the city could report on every year and say, hey, we had these 5 performance goals or performance targets. Here's where we're tracking each one of those. And then that all kind of sums up to this greater goal and vision.
Lacey, I think I know the answer to this, but when the original goal the 2035 goal was set from the original goal, I'm guessing that deaths and serious injuries actually increased over that span of time. Am I correct? Or did they actually have a decrease?
No, they went up.
It went up. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a lot of us in traffic safety have had kind of a midlife crisis in the last 5 years, particularly since COVID, because all of these numbers keep going up. And, we feel like we're doing the right things and it's not changing, and it's going in the wrong direction. And so there is, I will say, in 2025, some preliminary data shows that maybe we're trending back down, which is encouraging. Clearly not nearly as much as we would like that to be, but yeah, the last 5 years have really kind of skewed all of the trends that we thought we might see in traffic safety.
I would like to say one more thing and then move on, or somebody else can talk. But you were talking about targeting areas or things versus the system-wide, and I get what you're saying, but my question about it is, for instance, downtown Salem, I know, is a hotspot for crashes. And I feel like we've made a lot of progress downtown by doing pedestrian lead intervals, by looking at no right on red, considering dropping the speed to 20. So I know that there are system or areas within the system that there are like a lot of really low hanging fruit things that we can do. I thought I saw it in here as kind of those quick, what are they called? Quick builds, ways that we can do things quickly, cheaply in order to increase the survivability of that area of the city. And would that not be something that we could use as one of our targets, right? Like if we looked at all those hotspots around the city, we made the quick updates to those, could we then mathematically get to a place where we could say, I think we could achieve that goal, in 15, that first goal of 15 years from now, or whatever it is. Does that track?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's when we get to those, like you're saying, once we know what those strategies are that we want to focus on, we know what the crash patterns are specifically in those locations, we blend those together and we, talk through that in terms of if we implement this specific strategy in these places, what is that reduction and how does that inform this greater vision?
So we could have a performance target that's, geographically bound, sort of like within the downtown or maybe along these certain hotspot corridors. Our target is to reduce whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask a clarifying question from earlier? You mentioned popularity contests. Okay, I'm not a planner. I don't know if I'm guessing that's kind of a common understanding of that definition. What did you mean by that? And is like our hotspots popularity concept?
Well, what I meant was that sometimes, what's the right word? I'm sure I'm not gonna say this right. The squeaky wheel, right? You know, you hear about people saying, you know, the squeaky wheel gets something done. And, you know, I think the goal of this project is to, you know, yes, acknowledge the public input about their areas of concern, but also look at the data. So it may be that the people you're hearing from are just a certain segment of the population that are willing to
Neighborhood
reach out.
specific, perhaps.
Right,
And not kind of
versus
popularity.
maybe the data shows that this area over here is actually a worse
Yes, okay,
problem.
cool.
That's what I meant.
Okay, that was fine. I thought, but wouldn't it be popular to fix the hotspots first? I just was holding on to that. Thank you for
Okay.
letting me clarify. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Okay,
And Lacey, we're
Yes.
relying on you to keep us on track for the agenda, just so you
Okay.
know.
I will do my best. Thank you. Okay, so I think the vision statement, I know we've talked a little about it, we've seen some examples, but really what we want to land on is what does a safe transportation look like in Salem? The values it should reflect, words or phrases that resonate with you. And then we kind of have this last one is we can separate if we get really hung up on this, the numbers part, right? As I said, some of the examples or all of the examples blended, I think the mission and the vision, they can be one combined statement or we can separate them out if that, you know, gives anybody, makes anybody excited about separating them out. So in the kind of packet of the memo that we shared, we put together just, this is a very like, you know, potential statement, nothing that we have to work with, just to kind of set the stage. And this one does not have the dates tied to it. But this is a potential vision statement. Salem believes that everyone deserves to get home safely every day. We envision a transportation system that is safe and accessible for all people, regardless of age, ability, income, or mode of travel, where no one is killed or seriously injured. Again, this is just kind of a seed idea. It does not have to be something that we necessarily move forward with, but I'd love to get people talking about if you had a vision statement, right? This is when you talk about this plan, what is this plan trying to achieve? What does it look like in the future when we say we've reached vision 0 and we've reached the vision of this plan? What would you want that to incorporate?
Reading the statement, I wanted to take out Salem believes that. I feel like it leads us in sort of limping to the strong vision. So, because everyone deserves to get home safely, and I think it starts the sentence out confidently. Salem also believes that, but I mean, dropping Salem elsewhere in there would be cool. And probably important.
Well, you're right in that like envision in the second sentence is a stronger word than believes. Would you agree?
I mean, it depends on how many times a day you read the word envision. It starts somewhere. But I mean, but I don't want to say that's not a good vision statement word, but I think everybody can agree that we believe that. I just think if we're launching into a big goal, coming in with a strong statement, it doesn't have to be that at all. But starting out real strong feels like a good step.
So let me just make sure I understand what you're suggesting. Deleting the Salem believes that and just starting the statement with everyone deserves. And then on the next sentence, were you suggesting a change there as well?
Oh, no.
Okay,
No.
just confirming. I'm not really on the committee, but I don't have any problem with that. I think that sounds good.
My perspective is just to make it really short and punchy. So by the date we decide, 2050, no one dies in Salem traveling on the roads. You know, no one is killed or seriously injured while traveling on our roads. However you want to.
Short. I like it short, for sure.
The mission is gonna, everything below, you know, the triangle, like the vision's super short and punchy and is that, you know, moon on the wall, and then everything kind of grows underneath it. So all these other things in here are good, envisioning and accessibility and regardless of age and income, but all that stuff will come later after the just basic statement that we don't want anyone to die while traveling through the city.
I like that you said, and I don't actually know how I feel about this in the long run, but I'll tell you why I'm saying this. I don't know. Like I say the word infrastructure a lot because I'm geeky like that, but nobody understands what that means in like the day-to-day folks, right? Who don't think about water and sewer and traffic and, you know, all of those things. Do people understand, or is that kind of the common language of transportation system? Right? I mean, is that what people use, or do they use roads? Or streets or whatever it is, right? Like,
No one says, most people will stop reading after they see the word transportation system.
right?
So what we
You don't
are.
have to read more than just the
Right.
vision statement if we lose them at that.
So what we're calling this project is the Safe Streets for All action plan, and so maybe we tie in something to
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
I guess the only other question I have is, do people think of streets to include sidewalks or not?
Yeah, I hear you. Like, I know why you use the term transportation system,
I don't know.
and it goes against my personal, like how I view it, but I also know that I'm geeky and I think about this a lot, and so therefore I use different language. So I want this to be really accessible to everybody and really like something that everybody can read and know exactly where we're all at.
When you say, if we said by 2050, no one in Salem is killed or seriously injured on its streets, or
No one is killed or seriously injured on streets in Salem.
on streets in Salem.
And sidewalks. I think sidewalks you could add. It's not that
Yeah,
much.
but
more.
people in general, they don't get killed on sidewalks. They get killed when they're crossing the street.
That's true.
So it's like, and when am I worried? When I'm walking. It's not when I'm on the sidewalk, except for tripping.
The
But
only concern I would have with that, the only concern I have with that piece is I don't want, because such a significant portion of this is aimed at vulnerable users, cyclists, pedestrians, those sorts of things. I don't want an emphasis on, I would be concerned that an emphasis on roads might appear to not emphasize that, you know, we are focused on vulnerable road users, even if you're totally right that pedestrians tend to be better off on the sidewalk than when they're crossing the street. But I would just be concerned that it would lead into this general sentiment that we're focused on safety in the road environment versus for our more vulnerable users.
well, if you say streets and sidewalks, then that captures it all. But I think as soon as you start to try to,
Then people are gonna be like, what about the bike lanes?
You could add crosswalks too.
You see it, this is how we see transportation system, or our buses, or like, you know, like.
Could we avoid this whole kind of these nuances by saying nobody is killed or seriously injured when traveling in the city? And then we don't have to specify the infrastructure?
Yeah. You
Is
don't
that,
I don't like it. We have an airport. I immediately thought of airplanes and I should not have. I'm sorry, y'all.
yeah, traveling doesn't sound like what you do every day.
Traveling sounds like fun too. That's a like vacation.
I'm guessing that you guys are gonna take all this feedback and hash it out and come back with
Yes.
something at the next
Yes.
meeting.
Yes.
Can I just say that I really do like everyone deserves to get home safely every day? Like, I think that that's a really like equalizer statement. And I think it brings in everybody, and I think you guys are gonna come up with the perfect way to say all modes of transportation, and I agree with Paul that it should have a date.
Yeah.
okay,
Feedback.
Maybe you just catch it by just saying all users,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're using it if you're crossing the street, you're using it if you're riding a bike or bike on in a bike lane. Right, but that still kind of steers away from the idea of what you were talking about, of like.
Well, transportation planners call people users, like, people don't call themselves users.
Users of the transportation system.
So
I just had a thought of like how many like everyday folks are gonna actually read this. Probably,
Or
it's only the people who are like super geeky about transportation that are gonna read this.
Maybe instead of users, you just say people.
Is there a readability service like for dropping it down to sixth grade that would help us find a way of?
Mhm.
I don't know how cities and probably have a lot of access to that kind of thing. I don't know if that would be useful and
Hey, Lacey, we have tools on the contract, right?
Yes.
Some of our public education parts of this. Maybe we can get their feedback on it as well.
Yep, absolutely. I know everybody online has been kind of quiet. Any other thoughts from folks on this sort of vision topic?
I would just throw in that I like the sound of to get home safely, but back to Counselor Tigan's comment, it's really traveling in the whole area. You could be traveling through, you're coming to work, right? So the notion of everyone gets home safely, but you really want to incorporate a little broader perspective, kind of back to the idea of traveling, passing through, you're coming to work, right? You're going to the park. You don't want to get mowed down. So
Coming from somebody who lives in McMinnville, right?
yes, right. Somebody who's commuting into Salem.
Well, yeah, and I think the counter to that, right, is if you're on your way to work and you get hurt, you still don't make it home safe that same day,
Yes,
right?
that's
So
true.
yeah, regardless of the purpose of your trip, we want everybody to get home. But I do appreciate that. We've heard on other plans also, right, this idea that not everybody has a home, right? And so does that kind of incorporate something that unintended messaging as well.
What was the Marion County statement again, the first sentence of it?
No one is killed or seriously injured while traveling on our roadways.
I sort of like that.
Okay. Anyone else before we move on? Okay. Whoops, going the wrong way.
So, Lacey, how are you planning to loop this back to the committee since the committee doesn't meet again until quite a while later?
Yeah, I think
Should we have a vision statement when we go out for public feedback?
yeah. So I was thinking in the next couple weeks we would kind of as a project team coordinate and put together our recommendation for them, and then we can circulate it to the committee kind of via email, and then it'll also be as part of our engagement activities. Okay. So the mission statement that goes along with the vision, again, I think where we're kind of landing is combining these. So we probably don't need to spend a whole lot of time on this one. We can kind of shift further to the goals, but this is really where we identify any focus or strategies and how we want to achieve the vision. Somewhat maybe there's guiding principles, maybe highlighting coordination, working with partners, specific strategies that we want to include. And so this is where we had laid out this kind of date and then how we would do it, right? So by making data-driven decisions, equitable investments, designing safe streets, managing speeds, cultivating partnerships, and building that culture of traffic safety. And this, like, to an early point is where we kind of get into some of those more details. But now that I'm reading this, I also think maybe we focus on the goals, because a lot of these were also in those potential goal statements. And then we use the goals to kind of work backwards and craft that mission statement. They're very much related, I will say. But does anyone have kind of something they really feel strongly that they would want included in a mission statement? If we keep that vision very short and sweet, is there anything that we wouldn't want to lose that we'd want to make sure is incorporated in a mission to go along with that vision statement.
Can we have a date in the mission and in the vision? Would that be? Too much? It felt like an or kind of thing earlier, but.
I mean, you could have both. Yeah, I don't think it has to be an or. Usually it's in one or the other, but it can be in both as long as they're consistent, right?
Do we want to bring in here, I don't know. I'm thinking about post-crash care, is that adequately reflected in this?
Yeah, probably not.
That seems like an important one because what I've heard from the city is that post-crash care is a place where you see that you can make improvements.
I hate to get caught up on something, but is fatalities a word that we would want to use, or would we just make it deaths?
Fatalities is the technical term
Right.
that we use. Same thing.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of, if a seventh grader read this or, it came home in a packet of some amazing program that you guys did for outreach in all of our schools. And it said the word fatalities, would they be able to connect that dot, or could we just make it a more universal traffic deaths instead? But that could just be me.
What are the focus groups on this? Messaging, I'm sorry. I'm sure, I assume that there are, in public health, we do lots of messaging, focus group messaging.
Yeah.
Is this one of the things?
I mean, I was gonna say, this is not our public education materials. I mean, I get that we want it to be accessible, but I would think we would also be translating it a bit to simplify as part of public education messaging. If that can fit into here, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think that traffic deaths, works for me.
I think that brings up a good point, and something that we'll want to be intentional and consistent with is this terminology, right? And so, in the vision statement, it was people focused, right? So it's about people. So in that case, if we carry that same kind of tone and language, it would be where no one is killed or seriously injured, right? So instead of saying no fatal crashes, for example, is a lot less personal than nobody is killed in a crash. So I think that's something that we can maintain through all of our mission, vision, and goals, is that same focus on people, as opposed to like this one introduces fatalities and serious injuries instead of deaths and serious injuries, or people killed and seriously injured.
I like that a lot, especially as you look towards changing our culture and how we all talk about transportation. I try to be really intentional about saying, instead of pedestrians, I say people who are walking, or people who are riding a bike instead of cyclists, because of that like dehumanizing factor of those terms. And just that it brings that human aspect back in. And I really like what you're saying. And I thank you for kind of teasing that out of what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. I think it's something we kind of gloss over sometimes, but the language can be really powerful.
I mean, I think in general, the mission statement covers, it says in the draft document, the reflecting the safe system approach. I am sort of surprised, or maybe I need to read into it, which maybe is a weakness, but both in the mission statement and in the goals, there's really nothing from what I saw about impaired driving enforcement, traffic enforcement. There's speed management, there's culture of traffic safety, but it doesn't ever say, arresting drunk drivers, or, which we know to be such a huge part of the problem. And so whether there's a quick way to say it in the mission statement or somewhere else in the goals, it just felt very missing.
I do wonder if that piece fits better under goals as kind of a specific, as Carl was mentioning, a specific piece that needs to be addressed rather than as kind of these broader aspirational vision and mission goals. It feels a little more like than some of these more aspiration moon on the wall, as you put it.
Yeah.
But I think that it makes sense in more of the goal piece, but I also think that I again, like kind of thinking from a high level perspective, I think that enforcement more broadly makes more sense as like a broad goal than specifically like inebriated driver enforcement.
Right.
Yeah, because the minute you said that, I was like, well, what about distracted driving, right? Because that's gonna be up there as well. When you see people watching their Netflix shows as they're driving and terrifying you. Yeah.
Is there a spot for, I don't know how many places, it might be all of them, but policy? I mean, so lowering BAC is gonna be a state legislature policy and would do a lot of work on that. Does it fit in here? Is that culture of traffic safety, or is there a place to insert something with like coordinated state policy or something like that? Or is that?
I think that the strong partnerships piece a little bit speaks to that. And I think that's kind of where, to Hayden's point, the specific goal addressing that kind of behavior is really kind of woven throughout a lot of those pieces that we have in there, including partnerships with police, with enforcement, the culture side of it. And I mean, if people can't drive as fast on our street, even if they're inebriated, they still can't do as much damage. So I think that's some of those more specific aspects can really be kind of woven across what we've called out here and might fit well within some of the targeted goal language.
Is that why it was speed management and not enforcement broadly, was because of, and I recognize that Marion County has, identified their kind of big culprit for the deaths on their streets. Is it the same here in the city of Salem? Are we seeing high, in impaired driving, or has it just been speed as a kind of our top one?
I think in the city of Salem, if I remember correctly, and I can go back and double check, I think speed involved crashes was a higher proportion than impaired driving. But also this speed management, that's a really broad categories, right? So it's not just enforcement, it's also designing our streets to encourage slower speeds. It's traffic calming, it's things like that that are beyond just the enforcement piece, but recognizing how big of a role speed plays in the injury outcome of a crash. And that's something we can manage a lot more in a city potentially than in a rural area like Marion County also.
The other thing that I would just kind of tag to Lacey's point there, I had the thought in my head and I just lost it. Just give me a second. It's coming back. The other thing that I would tag to Lacey's point there is that, and as sure Sergeant Copewood can attest, we are not going to be able to enforce our way to zero fatalities or serious injuries. We do not have the resources to be able to, enforce our way to safer streets necessarily. And so it ties into that kind of safer streets model where yes, working with our partners in the police department and fire for post-crash care enforcement is going to be absolutely important, but we can't lean on, arresting our way out of drunk driving issues in town to solve fatalities or serious injuries, deaths or serious injuries.
And I will note that in goal 1, we also talk about the, potential strategies include, working with enforcement, safety education, as well as post-crash care to achieve the goal of eliminating deaths and serious injuries.
Yeah, I stand corrected in terms of, I didn't see it anywhere, but I definitely see it a little bit more as we talk through it, so.
Okay, so the notes I have here on the mission statement, if we decide to keep it or if we blend it with the vision statement, is make sure we address or incorporate post-crash care into this somewhere, and then also maintain that people-focused language. And I think some of the other topics we've talked through will come out more in the goals and kind of the more granular information in that. So why don't we shift to goals real quick? And then we can always circle back to the mission statement if we come up with anything that we really want to make sure we include there. So when we think about goals, trying to pick things that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And this last one, I put a note that a lot of times the goal statement itself won't necessarily have a time constraint on it, but we get into those performance measures, like I mentioned earlier, where we'll set time-based targets for when we're going to achieve those individual goals. So these were some of the goal statements that were in the draft packet. Again, these there's no magic number of goals that we need to land on. These are also, there's a lot of other places within the city where there's goals, right? And so even thinking about the transportation system plan, it's going to have a whole set of goals coming up soon. There's a lot of other policies and programs at the city that have goals. So trying to focus on what this action plan itself, what the goals are for that, and then kind of relying on or kind of circling out to those other documents where maybe we have a broader goal that we think is important as well, but it may not be a great fit for this specific action plan. So some of the ones that we outlined here, and these are just the top level goal statements. There was more kind of sub examples of what these might include in the packet, but designing and maintaining safe streets, implementing context appropriate speed management, prioritizing fairness in transportation safety, using data to guide investments, strengthening partnerships and community engagement, fostering a culture of safety, and then seeking safety funding opportunities. I added that one in as well. How does this kind of, do any of these just feel like not a great fit? Do any of them feel like a must-have? We need to have a goal specific to that? Or yeah, kind of any general thoughts on must include, must not include?
Are you gonna take a stab at, are you gonna go ahead back and rewrite these also from that person-centered viewpoint for a consistent language?
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe also from the city's question to Hayden and Julie and Kara is, do you have an ideal number of goals given all the other things that you have, you know, with the TSP coming up and things that you feel is reasonable? Or I know we can't necessarily match them perfectly because they're at different points in the process, but if you want to provide any guidance on how many goals or how broadly we want to address this, feel free to share as well.
Speed management seems like an important one to have in there, especially with Salem switching to the 20 is plenty concept. It really seems to fit what Salem's doing.
Lucy, to your question about the number of goals, one thing that I would point out about the goals that you have listed on the screen here is they seem to be, as opposed to like, we're gonna go see, like, let me figure out exactly how to phrase this. They seem to be more like decision-making guidance as we're, you know, evaluating projects and implementing planning studies and doing the work that we do on a regular basis. It's, are we using data to guide our safety investments? Are we strengthening our partnerships and community engagement, as opposed to specific additional work that needs to go out and be completed to, you know, we're gonna go check the box on this goal and we're gonna walk away from it. And so in that context, I don't have a lot of concern about number, because it's more of this kind of guiding framework for how we make safety decisions in the city versus additional, like, okay, you know, I need to find time on Thursday to go do this, so.
Yes, Thursday is to prioritize fairness. And Friday, you'll be using data.
Yeah. So we need 5 goals, one for each day. But yeah, to your point, thank you for mentioning that also, is that one of the kind of primary uses of these goals in the development of this plan is going to be when we get to those projects and strategies and policies and making sure that we're picking the right ones and that we're prioritizing the right ones, and using these goals to inform that process as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think these feel good, and then as you get to, I'm also looking in the draft at just the strategies underneath those, how measurable those are. As you threw up, you know, the definition of a SMART goal. These goals themselves aren't necessarily written that way, but the different strategies to achieve them could be. And so I think that would probably just play itself out further on in the planning process than this first kind of cut at them. Like, I don't know how to measure a fostering a culture of safety,
I don't either.
number of events held at a school, you know, whatever. But kind of, you know, you can imagine it, but it's not captured in that
Right.
broad title.
So that's the sort of thing that we did, is it's by number of events when we looked at grants for that sort of thing.
You can also do surveys, yeah, kind of get people's, and we'll be doing a little bit of that specific to the 20 is plenty of like measuring people's understanding and interest before and after you do some sort of campaign. But yeah, that's a much harder one to quantify compared to some of the others.
The only thing that I'm like catching on is the context appropriate speed management is a mouthful.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's a better way that we can state that. I really do want every person in Salem to read this document.
We've already lost them. And then if what they read is slow everyone down, then they're gonna have a problem with it. But context appropriate speed management, they're like, oh, I don't know about.
Yeah, because.
Let's not be
everybody wants to go
able to say.
faster. Nobody wants to go slow.
You just hit my favorite part of government document writing.
Is there anything missing from this list when you think of a goal for this project and what we
just
want
say-
the outcomes to be? Go ahead.
Chris French with Chariots. The goals talk about bicycle and lots of infrastructure, but all of them miss transit as part of what's exists in there. So we interact with intersections and pedestrian crossings and crosswalks, create lots of issues in the design for interactions between people crossing streets and cars going around buses. So
Maybe that's what's meant by separate users in space and time.
yeah.
I flagged that and leaned over and I was like, what does this mean?
That's not very accessible language, but yeah. Even though you're right, transit needs to be more prominent in this description.
Well, and how does, I guess I won't ask this other big question, but to your point, when I think about our goals in climate action and the fact that we need to increase transit users by how many percentage?
4 times.
4 times. And where, if it's not even in this document, then we're not gonna get there if it's not stated or even at a higher priority. Which then ultimately impacts people who are walking and people who are biking, because you are all connected into a network.
There also is like the goals that are outside of this, and so like the decrease in vehicle miles traveled isn't encompassed in this, but fewer cars on the road will improve all of the methods of keeping street users safer.
Except for speed.
Except for speed.
During COVID, speeds went way up.
Never
So
came down. So in goal 1 on bullet 3, you have prioritizing safety within existing city processes and policies. This one to me seemed like, is this, I mean, I don't know what we were getting at, like, you know what you were trying to get at with this, so I would love to know a little bit more about that, but also, does a statement like that help integrate all of the different goals that the city has as far as our climate action plan or others, the TSP, like all of it, like how does it interact all together?
Yeah, I'd say to the first part of your question, I think it was as part of this process and as one of the required components of this plan is that we will be assessing all of the city's internal policies and procedures and looking for opportunities to better prioritize safety within them. So making sure that safety is a criteria in decision making in different parts of the city, and finding ways to bring that more to the forefront and advance it, whether it's making it easier for the city to fund safety projects, looking for ways for even like within the city fleet, right? Are there things we can do with the city vehicle fleet that would prioritize safety, right? So it's a very broad look at the city's own policies and processes. In terms of how it relates to these other efforts, I think, yeah, that's definitely something that we'll be incorporating as it makes sense, but we would love, any examples or anything where you feel really strongly that we need to make a tie to some of those, feel free to share those. I know we've got a long list of documents and things that we have on our list to be reviewing and aligning with, but we don't also want to make sure we don't miss anything. So feel free to share that.
Chris's comment about like where transit fits in kind of sparks a question within me, and maybe folks know the answer or see it or something, but none of these goals, they kind of, I don't see goals that are around shifting behavior. The foster of culture of safety may be that, but like maybe the goal to increase use in transit is real shift in behavior, like moving people from their cars to a bus is an improvement in safety, it's an improvement in climate. But that would need to be a goal, is to do something to shift people's behavior for that.
But we're not, I mean, I don't think this plan is really the place for that. I mean, I think that this plan is to make sure people are, ideally using safe behaviors with whatever mode that they're using.
But isn't it one of
You
the
were about to say
principles of, if we go back to that principle document, one of it is that like humans are involved. Humans
Right.
behave, they do something and we're trying to shift it so that they're more safe.
Shift the system so that their behavior is easier to keep in a contained safe.
Chris, you look like you're about to say something.
Yeah, I'm trying to think through it. My comment was more like design and maintain safe streets, and it like it is goal 2. And like one of those safe streets is that's where I'm like trying to say transit stops should be included in there, because that's the safe streets, that interaction, not to like, to give an example, traffic calming on Sunnyview at McKay High School. We put in, there's a crosswalk there that was put in, it's great, but there's nowhere to put a stop there. And so when we stop at the stop that was there before, cars can go around the bus at the crosswalk. So we stop to pick people up, kids are coming across the street and cars are coming around. So traffic calming is what it is, but the space between curb and sidewalk has to be wide enough so fire can get past, which means city buses don't. So that when I'm talking about, that's kind of where I was talking about safe street design, where you're thinking about it in the design of streets. When you are looking at crosswalks, you're designing it and you solve one problem, but you may create others. So that the design and maintaining safe streets, that's kind of the area that I was thinking of. As far as like safety, trying to get people on the bus, I would agree with what Julie said. That's kind of a different, changing behavior is kind of changing behavior will help with some of this stuff, but this kind of maybe is outside of that. I don't.
Yeah, appreciate it.
I recognized both of your statements, but I think I look at like foster a culture of safety, right? That means that we don't have a culture of safety right now. And I think you ask any person out on the road and they're like, yep, it's crazy out there. People driving are, safety is not the top thing. It's a very individualistic view of how do I get somewhere as fast as possible. So I don't understand what the difference of changing behavior and fostering a culture of safety. I don't see how those are different from each other, I guess. And I get how Paul is saying you want to pull out the behavior word to help drive it home, for lack of a better phrase. I didn't mean to say it.
Drive home safely.
Safely, following all the rules.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand what's being talked about here, because I don't. Are we suggesting that we want to have some sort of goal in here to move people out of their cars and into transit?
Yes.
Is that what we're talking about?
Well, I guess I would advocate for that if in our data-driven decision mode, that there was like a real change could be achieved in the number of deaths or serious fatalities if more people are on a bus. If that's true, then we should hold it as a goal. If it's not true, then let's hold it as Chariots can hold it as a goal and the climate action plan can hold it as a goal. But for saving lives, let's focus on the things that save lives.
So if we were to, through data to show that people walking and biking are getting killed more, should we assume that everybody should get in a car? I mean, should we encourage people to be in a car because that's safer?
Not everybody can walk and bike.
No, I know.
Yeah, no, I know.
I know.
Well, I guess, yeah, you're, okay.
I'm
I appreciate your counterpoint. I get it. I get it.
I guess one point that I would make when we're talking about adjusting people's behaviors, as we talked about earlier, some of these goals are kind of like, what is the city, like what framework is the city using as we're making decisions in this plan to advance safety? There are some things in here that are not explicitly designed to influence people's behavior, looking at like, roadway configuration, some of the public engagement pieces that are in here. There are some things that are oriented towards changing behavior. I guess I have a little bit of like, about putting in changing behavior as a specific goal, because I can't change anybody's behavior. We can do some things around the city and in this plan that help them, encourage better decision making. But I can't make anybody do anything, and neither can anyone else except for Sergeant Colfoy. And so that's part of my concern about the adjusting behavior piece as a attainable goal.
I think the framing of it as an action plan and what actions can we take, and thinking about before somebody gets on transit, they are walking or they are biking. And so through road design, can we encourage that behavior? Like if it feels more comfortable and it feels safer for people to make those choices, then more people may opt to take the bus because now they have a safe connection to get there.
Right.
And I think that there are actions we can take through that goal of designing and maintaining safe streets that support that long-term vision, but that what we're calling out here is truly that action of how are we getting there. And I think the same thing on the fostering the culture side, it's really focused on how are we promote, like what actions can we take as the city to help promote and kind of develop that culture of safety where we maybe don't have one or as much as one as we'd like right now. So I think that's the difference between thinking about some of these goals around mode shift. Here we're targeting actions that we can take, and they might support those from other documents, but as we're looking at this, it's really about the actions directly related to safety we as a city can take.
Can I ask one more thing? I said the word state agencies earlier. I am not a city or county employee, and it's just an idea. In public health, it works really great sometimes to work with state stuff. But my public health part wanted to see a little more state specifically called out in here, and I don't know if that's part of the scope. Again, part of the scope, is that too far out? Or is it necessary? It feels necessary, but I don't entirely know. But instead of it kind of being understood as part of the like agency cooperation to name it.
You're talking about under goal 6?
Well, and
Six.
I thought in number 1, and then, yes, another, and I wrote ODOT in there, and then I just state policies, which is a different, I guess, engagement process, but.
Do you have any more on those lines? So both Clackamas County and Barron County have found that implementing public health measures are very helpful for transportation safety. So do you have anything more along those lines?
Oh, with public health, transportation safety things?
Yeah.
The only thing I think about is lowering the BAC to 0.05. Cause that's as far as I've gotten on that, and because of how much it could make a difference. Don't ask me the numbers, please. But
It's effective in Utah.
Utah and Europe, I mean, that's pretty cool. Washington wants to do it, but they haven't yet. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the path to victory here on anything like that. I'm going to, there's a meeting on Friday. So I'm gonna talk about it, but that is, as far as public health has been so divorced from planning for so long. But that we've kind of missed out on all these opportunities to partner really nicely. But then you bring in substances, it's like, oh, public health can talk about that. So that's as far as I've gotten. And I know that cannabis plays into that too. I think it's a little more complicated. I think the alcohol one is the one I've spent the most time with.
Yeah, I will share that the statewide safety action plan, the new version, the draft, does have that as a named strategy to reduce the BAC to 0.05. So that doesn't mean, it's going to happen tomorrow, but it is a priority at the state level as well.
So I have 2 questions. So DCAS is excellent at what they do. And so when they bring in goals to brainstorm, they've got a lot of things that we're thinking about. But Paul, is there anything that city council, that you've heard city council talking about that they're frustrated about safety that isn't included in this list?
No, and I think when you start to see the strategies that are kind of underpinning each one of these goals, then it really becomes pretty encompassing and almost like hard to prioritize of the, now 30 strategies, like which ones are the ones that have the real meat to them. I mean, I think most people would, I don't think it's going too far out on the limb that people on city council feel the same way former councilor Stapleton feels, which is like, how fast can we make these changes in order to let people know we're serious about it? And so I think the speed element is almost as important as the what. But I mean, not speedy, but the quickness in which we do things. I think it, but the honest truth is that as a council, we really haven't taken a lot of time to discuss these things as a body. And we don't discuss things when we're not as a body, of course. So I think the transportation system plan is going to give us the opportunity to discuss it more with the community.
Can I ask my second question?
Well, I was just gonna do a quick follow-up on your question, which is, do you think it would be helpful to have a goal tied to that desire for, quick fixes, sort of a, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like goal to prioritize actions that can be done more quickly than actions that are gonna take 20 or 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, and I was thinking about that on the last page of on page 7 of the draft. Identifying corridors and intersections, implementing quick build safety improvements. To me, these feel really, those especially, I think, would go a long way to the community saying, these are the places we're gonna focus. And maybe we're still within the window of using the livability bond money in order to get a quick build safety improvements.
She just did a really sharp intake of breath when you said that.
It just seems to me
Uh,
that if it could be a separate goal to, you know, within all of this, you know, focus on things that can be both effective but done more quickly. I mean, because, you know, so many things end up costing so much that they're not gonna happen for, you know, decades.
And setting ourselves up to have that goal in place that says just because we can't do the ultimate long-term thing doesn't mean we're not going to do anything ever at this location.
Right. So anyway, just a thought.
Now, I know that some of the plans that some of the projects that were approved in the bond have, at least when I was on the committee, we took a lot of that opportunity with pavement R&R to like increase access and safety for all road users. Like I'm thinking about Silverton Road where we, you know, implemented a 20-year plan into a now plan, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But I was looking at when we were just downtown, there was a bunch of intersections that the curbs were all redone at the intersections. And there was like lost opportunities to, you know, get rid of double turn lanes, which I know is like one of the things we can do to make people who are walking safer. And then to open up access. And so now it's still a 3-way intersection for pedestrians or people who are walking and not 4, right? So like there's just these opportunities that are like low hanging fruit, right? That I would love to see implemented. And I think that really encourages me. This conversation encourages me because when did I make the Vision Zero motion? Like I feel like it was like 23 years ago already.
Yeah, 22. What year?
And so
I wanna say it was 21.
I think it's somewhere in there. I don't know.
it just feels like it's never going to start. And I think, yeah, and it's hard because also like the deaths keep going up, right? And you're like, all of us who are activists are trying to like claw back people's lives and their families and like, it's really important to us. And it just feels like we keep having another meeting.
Okay, so I
We
do
need
see
another
that
meeting.
we're almost at time, but I do wanna, Carl, you had one more thing?
So in my experience, staff hears very different things from council. And so I wanted to ask City of Salem staff, is there anything that you see on here that you think would be really beneficial to add? Or that you think that DKS may have not seen that's specific to Salem?
I wanna open that up to all staff, so fire and police, if you guys have anything that you think is not being represented, can you speak up? You have to unmute if you're gonna speak up then.
From fire standpoint, I think this is broad and this, as we get into it, I think we can narrow it down to what this all means. I think this is a good start.
Okay, Sergeant Kofoy, do you have anything to add?
I do not. I think maybe when it gets a little bit more specific, I might be able to offer a little bit more.
Okay. I don't have anything.
Awesome. I'm gonna pass it back off to Lacey. If you kind of want to go through just summary of feedback, make sure we're on the same page for today, and then we will talk about our next meeting and get everybody out of here, hopefully not too much later than we had planned originally.
Yes, 3 minutes. That's my goal. 4:05, I'll get you out of here. So yes, kind of summarizing everything we've talked about today. For the vision statement, we're going to try to keep that short and sweet. Make it personal language. Keep in there that kind of the key message of everyone deserves to get home safely every day. And do some wordsmithing on it, specific to including all road users, traveling, streets, and make sure it's encompassing everybody, but still very simple message. In the post-crash, or sorry, in the mission statement, we're going to find a way to also incorporate post-crash care as one of the elements mentioned, and again, carry forward that people-focused language. And then for the goals, definitely keeping the bulk of the goals. It sounds like there's general support for those. Rewriting goal number 2, that's kind of a mouthful for the context. Appropriate speed management. Find some ways to potentially fold in transit, maybe not as a standalone goal, but within the other goals and the strategies within them. Including the state agencies as partners as well for collaboration, and then finding a way to prioritize quickly implementable actions or quick build items. Anything that I missed? And we do have a recording, so we can go back and double check, but. Okay, so next steps, will be finalizing these statements, vision, mission, and goal. That will be shared both on the project website as well as our open house events, which we are scheduling now and should be in early June. At the same time, the project team is going to continue studying the data, engaging with the community at those open house events, and identifying the safety needs throughout the summer. And then we will all meet together again in August or September to go through kind of everything we've heard and talk about the safety needs within the city of Salem.
Lacey, can the committee get an invite to all of those open houses so we know when they're happening and possibly could attend?
Yes, absolutely. We will make sure to do that. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for your time. Apologies for going a few minutes over, but I really appreciate you all participating on this committee. This is just a really important project, and I hope will be a really meaningful plan for you all and for our community. So enjoy the rest of your day.